Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Taming of the Shrewd. The Taming of the Shrewd is a Polish romantic comedy that tells the story of Kaska, a scientist initially working in America before discovering her partner cheating on her, and decides to return to her small hometown in Poland. When her brother learns of her return, he decides to hire a man named Patrick to convince her to sell off her land. The two get off to a rocky start before she starts warming up to him more, and one can imagine where the plot goes from here. She starts to fall for him, while Patrick has to maintain his cover and navigate his own feelings for Kaska at the same time. I'm not going to be spending a whole lot of time talking about this movie, mostly because I'm dealing with a sore throat due to COVID-19, but to be honest, there's not that much to say about this movie anyway, and what is there isn't very good. It's just another boring, bland rom-com that doesn't do a good job at either being romantic or comedic. Out of the two leads, Kaska is definitely the more interesting one. Her background as a scientist is actually fleshed out to a certain degree, as she's passionate about saving the world bee population and commits to building her own apiary at home. It was nice to see her have goals outside of the romance. She isn't always a likable character though. Her reason for returning to Poland seems pretty drastic considering her circumstances, and she tends to have a negative attitude around most of the characters in this movie, though to be fair, it's mostly directed toward Patrick. Patrick wasn't an appealing character to me, largely due to how ordinary he is. The only thing he has going for in terms of personality is that he's supposed to be an avid traveler, with his escapades constantly getting referenced, but outside of a throwaway gag or two, this is never important to the story. Something that could have been fun if it was expanded on more was the fact that he owes money to a thug who is searching for him. This would have given Patrick extra incentive to do his job, but the movie barely does anything with the thug. He shows up in two scenes, both of them at the same spot, and never bothers to look for him again after, so there's no real sense of urgency behind Patrick's financial woes. There's also the fact that he has a sister who wants him to charm Kaska into selling her land so that she can get rare minerals on her land to build furniture with. I actually thought this was intriguing, but again, the movie barely spends any time exploring this idea, instead going for increasingly ridiculous lies and schemes that never pay off. Because of the amount of friction that's present between Kaska and Patrick from the outset, their romance isn't believable. She spends a good amount of time pretending to be interested in him, only to fake him out and rope him into an unfunny scenario as payback for his flirting. This hot and cold approach makes it difficult to become invested in them. Even later on, when Kaska starts to genuinely like Patrick, the two don't have much chemistry. Their bond develops at too late a point in the story to bother caring about what happens between the two, especially since it's based on lies anyway. This movie surprised me with how formulaic it ended up being. Girl leaves job from the big city, goes back to her small hometown to find her roots, and meets a handsome man she'll fall in love with. Everything about it has a cliche made-for-TV quality to it that cheapens whatever effectiveness it may have had. This goes beyond just the romance though. The rest of the plot is just as stale and confusing to boot. Patrick is supposed to convince Kaska to sell her property, but it's never clear if she's doing it for his sister or for her brother, since both of them ask. It doesn't make sense for him to be taking orders from two parties if both of their requests are pretty much the same. This whole dispute over the land and house that Kaska resides in is the most boring and tedious element of the whole movie. It just drags on and causes a ton of needless drama for everyone involved, especially as scenes keep getting recycled, and once again the pacing for it is all over the place. The movie's attempts to be comedic prove to be particularly bizarre. Some of it consists of slapstick that isn't funny, but what threw me off the most was how much characters shouted at each other. For a movie that's supposed to be a comedy, there's not a lot of joy to be found in it. There's a pair of restaurant employees, one of whom is Kaska's brother, and I could not stand these two. They are at each other's throats in virtually every scene in the movie, even when they're supposed to be angry at other people. Their tantrums were so annoying that I eventually resorted to muting the TV whenever they appeared. Apart from the two leads, every character acts really goofy. It's almost like they have the personalities of characters from family films, but they're situated in an R-rated environment. So there's this awkward juxtaposition between lightheartedness and seriousness that never feels right. When they're not annoying, the jokes are either uncomfortable, like with an overly sexual doctor who tries to have her way with Patrick, or they just don't make any sense, like with a goat that appears now and then to assault Patrick off camera, and that's it. No further context, no long-term payoff, just a goat that attacks Patrick. Riveting stuff. Thankfully, the movie does have more redeeming factors beyond Casca, mostly in the visual department. Between the locals' wardrobe and the folk-oriented soundtrack, the movie's rural Polish setting looks aesthetically appealing and gives at least a little extra flavor to the otherwise dull story. I'm struggling to think of any more things to say about this movie. It really is that uninspired. There's nothing wrong with making an unoriginal story, and honestly, the movie isn't completely terrible, but it barely attempts the smallest degree of originality, so there's little to recommend about it. Overall, The Taming of the Shrewd is a subpar romantic comedy that, in spite of its promising visuals and female lead, fails to present its story in a fresh and exciting way. If you like rom-coms and you want to watch one that takes place in rural Poland, you might get something out of watching this, but for me this was an easy pass. It doesn't come remotely close to reaching the expectations implied by its Shakespearean title. If anything, the movie itself is a shrew that needs to be tamed of its bizarre tonal shifts and annoying characters, but then again, it'd be easier to just forget about it and move on. What did you think about this movie? Did you find the Polish setting to be somewhat appealing, or were you just as annoyed by the characters as I was? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's gonna wrap up my review of The Taming of the Shrewd. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Argentinian comedy drama, Today We Fix the World. Bye bye!